Right. See, our attendees are joining us currently. All right. There we go. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the May 19th, 2025 meeting of the Zoning Preservation and Development Committee for ANC 1B. We have a fairly light agenda today, so I just want to quickly go through our roll call, and then I will review our agenda before we get started. So I'm just going to go through our list of committee members. Commissioner Kensek, it's not here. Christian Brandt is here. Jason Bellow.
Here.
Karen Brueggemann. Frank Chauvin. Karen Gall. Simon Handelman. Ian Hawksworth. Joel Heisey.
Here.
Lianyu Hong.
Here.
Fabulous. Daniel Kramer. Alex Smith.
Here.
And Bruce Flippins. Oh, okay. All right. So the one item on our agenda is a discussion of a draft resolution, which is titled "In Support of the Fair Housing Practices Amendment of 2025." And we are joined by Antonio Nunez, the Legislative Director for Councilmember Charles Allen. Before we get into that, I just have a few quick updates that I wanted to share, which were not necessarily worthy of the agenda, but are important nonetheless. So the first is that, as you know, in our last committee meeting, we had Alex Cross from the Department of Buildings join us. I did follow up with him with some questions that folks had at the committee, and members of the public had at the committee that we were hoping to have answers for. I have not heard back, so I have followed up again. That also includes an open invitation for the chief of buildings to join us at our committee to discuss the building collapse at 1113 V Street. I do not have any updates for you at this moment in time, though I know that there are some folks in ANC 1B who are diligently working on this, particularly folks from our Economic Development Committee. So if I have information to share, I'll definitely make sure to do that. And then the other thing I just wanted to mention, just to close the loop on this, is that there was a item on the HPRB docket for this, I think it's the 22nd, so it would be Wednesday or Thursday's meeting, that would have been something we would want to review. I think this item sort of fell through the cracks a little bit due to the transition between myself and Commissioner Kensek. But I will say that it was a fairly straightforward application. And so considering that we would not have been able to have the full commission weigh in on our recommendation before the HPRB made a decision about it, I opted not to invite these folks to our committee meeting, given that the application itself didn't seem to represent anything super significant. And I discussed this with Patrick at the last commission meeting. So unless there's anything else you wanted to add about that.
Just to clarify, so you don't get people confused, that case was actually on last month's HPRB
Yes,
meeting. We should have reviewed it at the last month's
meeting.
meeting to be able to weigh in through the ANC to get a vote. And as you said, I reviewed it, and you and I talked about it, and there was no real issue.
Yeah.
Remind me again, what was the application for?
It was for Florida Avenue, and it was a rear addition.
Yeah, I think the address is 1315 Florida Avenue.
I think so, yeah.
I'm happy to share the information with the committee after this, but it didn't seem worth it to sort of try and get the timeline corrected for us to be able to review. But
Because
yes,
it
thank you,
was
Patrick.
already, it
That
was
is correct.
already bumped. It was already bumped once because I had asked for it to be
Yeah.
bumped. So we wouldn't gonna bump it. They wouldn't bump it again, and then we would have been in the same dilemma we were in the previous month, and
Yeah.
it's not worth it. The other
But
thing, the
oh,
other
sorry, go ahead.
I just want to say, just for clarification, Christian, is that I
Mhm.
think you should take proper acknowledgement that you were officially voted in at the ANC meeting last as the new chair.
Yes.
Let people
Yes, that is true. I was
that
officially voted in at the
technically,
ANC meeting
yeah,
last month.
technically official now, so you're
Um,
not acting anymore.
no, I'm no longer acting. I'm just it's become real life. Um, yeah. So and just rest assured that I am getting the HPRB bulletins. We will make sure that whatever comes in front of the HPRB also comes in front of the ANC committee. So
And
um,
I'm still working, just so you know, Christian, just to reaffirm, Frank and I are still working on trying to get out of zoning a much better tool for us to use to track
zoning cases.
gay and zoning cases, because it's kind of arbitrary. It's not done like the HBRB where they actually
Yeah.
print the list. They do it internally, but they don't send it out. So Frank is out of town right now. He's actually on vacation. So he and I are going to hook up once he gets back in town and discuss that and some of this
Great.
arts overlay stuff that we've been working on.
Great. Thank you, Patrick. Okay, well, without further ado, I am going to I guess why don't we start with you, Mr. Nunez? If you would be I think you have the ability to speak unless you shake your head and you say no.
Can
Okay,
you
great.
hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
If you would be willing to sort of because I know that this is a bill that is being considered by a committee of the council currently, or will be. So if you'd be willing to get us started with an introduction to the bill, I'm happy to then transition into the um, statement that we're considering from the ANC's perspective.
Sure, happy to. Thanks, Christian. Again, hi everyone. My name's Antonio Nunez. Just call me Antonio. I'm here to talk to you all about the Fair Housing Practices Amendment Act of 2025, which is a piece of legislation that my boss, Councilmember Allen, who represents Ward 6, introduced last council period of the council, so October of 2024, and reintroduced at the start of this council period. I think it was in February, yeah, of 2025. The legislation is intended to address a problem that we're seeing, I would say, across the city. This started to become an issue for at least for a lot of the ward residents during the summer of 2024. A lot of residents were seeing the sort of random con service utility charge on their billing statements, and wanted to understand sort of where that was coming from. And I think a lot of residents are concerned, and came to my boss in particular, asking for a solution. So what we're seeing, or the problem generally, is that in a lot of the larger multi-unit residential buildings, they have started to charge tenants individually, so apart from the monthly rent, for the utility charges that the building itself has accrued for its common spaces. So um, electricity, water, sewage, HVAC, those are all sort of common charges that our office has been seeing. And what they will do is sort of they'll take the charge. So apart from, um, your separate utility charge that, a tenant is going to have to pay for their own unit, right? Um, these folks are having to pay for the electricity that the building has been using to light the hallway or the lobby or any other common space. And residents are concerned that there's a lot of lack of transparency around sort of how that, you know, charge was calculated in the first place. I've seen instances of residents trying to get a utility bill for the whole building from the management or the landlord and have been denied effectively. And some tenants have rightly asked for an explanation of how these utility charges are calculated, and some of them have not received a response. So the legislation that my boss introduced just says, landlords aren't allowed to do this anymore. And we think this is a good policy solution for the following 3 reasons. So first of all, these fees are outrageously high. We've seen a couple of instances um, of tenants being charged almost $400 a month for electricity for common spaces of the building. And again, I just want to remind folks that this is on top of what individual tenants are already paying for the utility charges that they are already paying for their individual unit. Second of all, these imposing separate charges for the common spaces to tenants just mask the true cost of rent. And in effect, when a tenant is going to, look at a building and they really like the unit, and they sort of see the rent price, these additional fees that can vary, are, kind of like drip pricing in a way, right? Like you're not actually getting the price that you expect to pay for at the end. And then lastly, some buildings have been pointing to a very overbroad and vague provisions in the lease, in my opinion, allowing the landlords to do this. I think it's much better if tenants have a clear expectation that, these are costs that they are responsible for. These buildings shouldn't be allowed to just point to sort of vague provisions when these tenants didn't have an expectation at the beginning that these charges would be, or that they would be responsible for these charges in the first place. So that's sort of my spiel. I'm here to answer any questions as you all consider a resolution. And you all have me until 7:30. So
Awesome. Thank you, Antonio. Do any of our committee members have a question that they'd like to get started with? Yeah, Alex, go ahead.
Sure. Quick question. So does this resolution kind of span every extra charge that happens that's not like tax, that's not already included in the rent? Or like how does it, I guess, how do the mechanics work?
So, I mean, I think the idea here is that all of these charges would be sort of baked in to what you pay in rent. So yeah, my sort of comparison to sort of drip pricing before, like we don't want any of that to happen. Like sort of, we want the rent to be the rent. And the idea is for for landlords to charge tenants the true cost of rent, and for them to have an expectation that living here in this particular building is going to cost X, period.
I do have a question. In terms of I guess my one question I have is what does the enforcement mechanism look like for this? So how are landlords, like once this is, like, let's say that the council approves this, um, how would tenants be able to hold their landlords accountable? How would this district hold landlords accountable, et cetera?
Yeah, that's a good question. And to be candid, I think that's a question that we need to answer at the hearing and sort of figure out through the process. The AG already plays a pretty big role here. Just flagging for you all that the AG did sort of release a sort of consumer alert or a press release last week, telling tenants how to navigate this. Our preference is to sort of ban this practice altogether. So tenants sort of have a clear expectation of what the monthly rent is. So in short, we do need to sort of figure that out, but I do anticipate the AG having a role here. probably more so just going after sort of the bigger buildings, more pervasive conduct that has, impacting a lot more people. That just sort of seems to align with sort of their mission. I would think the Office of Tenant Advocate as well. But yes, we'll need to sort of think that through a little bit more.
Well, just a couple of quick comments here. There should be already, under DC law, a standard operating lease that all buildings need to apply for. Those leases should be, just like any other document, uniform and state all of the things that are charged to a tenant, i.e., quote unquote, rent. The second point that I'll make is that what you're talking about here, and I think needs to be explained a little bit more in detail, is what's commonly known as escalation charges. And those are charges above and beyond the normal rent that you pay when you lease a space, and it incurs those things that are lighting in hallways, lighting in common areas, taxes that are paid, all of those things that are baked into the building that the building itself is paying. And there's a difference between an apartment rental and a condo rental. And I'm not against the concept of what Mr. Allen is trying to do here, but I think it needs to be clearly defined as to what are the things that can be done to really fix this problem, because just because a tenant doesn't feel they should pay an expense, if the building has an expense that it wants to pass off and it's not written into their lease properly, then the landlord has that right to do that. The issue is that most that I'm aware of, leases specifically say you are responsible for X, Y, and Z, and all the rest of them the landlord has to pick up. So I think there's some clarification that needs to be written into this legislation that talks about what is the current status of leases and what needs to be added in to protect tenants from these quote unquote bogus charges.
Sure, thank you. Your comment about rentals versus condos, it's sort of our opinion that this legislation is not or shouldn't be applicable to condos, just because, if you're living in a condo, you're paying a condo fee, and I'm a condo owner, like I expect my condo fee to pay for the building's water usage and for electricity in the common space, and that's a charge that I pay apart from my mortgage, right? So it's just a different world. But yeah, I'm happy to sort of take a look at the suggestion for clarification. And yeah, thank you. I'm gonna write that down.
Do any other committee members have questions?
Only that why didn't I think of doing this before?
Yeah, you should have gotten on the ground floor, Joel.
I guess I just have too many ethics.
Yeah. All right. We have four members of the public with us in the audience. I'm wondering if any of the members of the public who are here have questions for Antonio. All right. Seeing none, I do want to quickly share the draft resolution that Chair Trinidad Duramo shared with us earlier, and that I included in my email about the agenda. So essentially this is let me zoom in so that it's not so teeny tiny on your screens. And I apologize, I have my thing in black in dark mode, and I forgot to turn it off before I started this, so hopefully it's not too hard to read. But just so that you know, Chair Trinidad Drama sent some of his thoughts earlier via email. I'm happy to share those here if some of us have not had the chance to read them. But this is resolution intended to be voted on by the full ANC, that would, if approved, voice support for the Fair Housing Practices Amendment Act of 2025. I have read through it. I don't particularly have any questions or changes that I would like to see with regard to this. If any of the committee members who are here have any changes that they would like to see, I think now would be the time. Um, but I'm not sure that it makes sense for us to really go through this line by line unless we really, unless there's interest in that. I will say.
Christian, I would just ask,
Yeah.
Antonio, have you seen this draft legislation or resolution, I should say?
I have.
And you've been able to look through it?
I have.
And
And
you don't have any
I don't have any feedback for you all.
Okay, all right, that's what I was going to ask.
Great.
I mean, I've read through it. I don't have any issues or anything I would see adding or amending.
Great. Any other committee members have any thoughts before we? Okay. So I think maybe I do have one question for the folks who might know better than me before we move on. Is right now something where would it be appropriate for us to vote on a motion if somebody makes that motion to support this amendment, or not amendment, sorry, to support this resolution, or are we too early on in this process?
If he wants to vote on this in the June meeting, then you would want to make.
Great.
I'm assuming that Miguel wants it to come from the committee to the chair, to the commission. He could have
Yes.
put this up on his own, but he's asking the committee.
Yes, that is true.
Then the committee needs to recommend that this motion be put in front of the commission for a full vote.
Great. Sorry, you all disappeared there for a second. Okay, so I am wondering if anyone would like to make a motion to support this resolution. I'm not sure that I can really make the motion because I'm the chair.
Okay. I don't know who else is here. I'll do it.
Make a motion if you.
I mean,
Yeah.
I'll do it if you want. I don't know who all is here. Jason just kind of sits back there and lets everybody else do everything.
It's not always true.
Oh, there he is. There
I'm
he is.
here,
I was hoping to get some
but
kind of a
I don't feel.
I was hoping to get some
I
kind of a
sensed,
comment out of him.
I sensed your passion on this one, so I thought I would let you do it.
Well, only that, damn, why didn't I think of these charges 25 years ago when I started this? I'd like to make a motion that the ZPD recommends to the full ANC to support the resolution in support of Fair Housing Practices Amendment Act of 2025 as presented to the committee.
Okay. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Great. I think just because of the number of people who are here, let's just do show of hands. Everyone who's in favor, please raise your virtual hand. Okay, 4. I see 4. Everyone who is opposed, raise your virtual hand. And Alex, if you could lower yours. Yeah.
I couldn't find my hand, but I'll raise it. I'm Bruce.
Okay, great. Thank you, Bruce. So, and then everyone who's abstaining, raise your hand. Okay, so the motion carries. We had 4 in favor, 1 not in favor, 0 abstentions. So I will make sure that this motion is communicated to the committee, and hopefully we'll hear about the resolution at the next ANC meeting. Alex.
quick question of Antonio, just while we have him, just because I was quickly skimming the bill or the text, at least what I could find of it, and it looks like it's like specifically calling out utilities like electricity, gas, wastewater, and water consumption. But what about things like if they want to charge for internet? Or I think like examples were given of like the electronic call box. What if that becomes a separate, like,
That's actually added into this resolution, Alan. If you look in the resolution, he's put those specific things in there.
Yeah,
Oh.
and Alex, our office is open to exploring that. When we drafted this, we just heard the complaints around the utilities, but now I think some folks have been expanding to even like the electronic door keys, charging separately for that. So we're certainly open to including that in legislation
And
as
that
it moves forward.
that is technically, as far as I know from my experience, the utilities are usually commonly known as water, gas, electric. They are now phasing in a lot of places, internet as a utility since it's becoming the norm. The key box entries for buildings are really that's a questionable thing because that's a breakable item. And usually they do charge extra for that if you have to have a new door key issued or a door locked. I don't think it's
Yeah, but that's separate than a monthly charge,
yeah,
you
right.
know.
But that's what I'm
And
gonna
there's
say. That's not a monthly thing. That's usually a one-time fixer. So maybe that legislation can call that out in different language if you wanted to use it differently.
Jason.
Yeah, I mean, just my 2 cents, and I haven't read the full legislation, is one easy test is whether for these charges, whether you can opt out to them, right? Like if you live in a building and your building is offering you, some kind of fancy service that you can choose not to use, it would seem potentially reasonable for the building to be allowed to charge for that. But if it's the actual key fob and they don't allow you to have a
Yeah.
hard key, then it would seem to me that that should be included in the rent. So like the ability to opt out could potentially be a helpful test in determining um, whether it should be included or not.
All right. Well, it is 7 o'clock. We have gone through all of our items that were added to the agenda. And so I would like to see if there's any new business. All right. I'm hearing none. So since there is no new business, I think we can adjourn for today. Thank you for a relatively light meeting. Maybe we will have more cases. Oh, Jason, yes.
Yeah, sorry, accidentally
Oh,
raised my hand. Sorry.
no worries. I,
always
I thought
seeking
you were,
attention.
yeah, I thought you were gonna have some new business. There for a second. Anyway, I look forward to seeing you all at our next committee meeting. I don't have the date off the top of my head in June. Um, and otherwise, I will be in touch if there's any cases that we should be reviewing for that.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. And thank you, Antonio, for joining us.
Thank you
Thank you.
all.
Bye-bye.